like to give you a good idea of how naturopathic medicine looks at fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome from the point of view of assessment as well as causative factors and some therapeutics also. So feel free to ask questions as we go along. If something occurs to you, just raise your hand and we'll see if that can be fit in. Now, a few key words that we'll revisit a few times. Individuality is the first word. In terms of making an assessment, a medical assessment, individuality is often not part of the picture. So what we have is maybe a dozen or so people diagnosed with fibromyalgia and or chronic fatigue syndrome, but they're not at all the same in almost every other way. And this turns out to be very important clinically. To give an example, some people may have difficulty with their bowels, either in digestion or elimination. Other people, that's not a big symptom. Some people will have a very low energy level, and some people's energy levels will be medium or moderate. Now, if the energy level is quite low, then they'll also get chronic fatigue syndrome attached. So these are the two big diagnostic categories, and they often go together. It's not enough to know what a person's medical diagnosis is. It's not enough to begin to understand what needs to be done. My experience is that no matter what the diagnosis, everything in the body needs to be improved all at once in order for the person to be feeling better, in order for the diagnosis to no longer be there. So there are so many different symptoms that are part of chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia, other than weakness and muscle pain, that it often seems that everything in the body is involved. The gut's involved, sometimes the lungs are involved, the immune system is involved, the musculoskeletal system is involved, the nervous system is involved. Various glands can be involved, like the thyroid gland, for instance, or the adrenal glands. So these diagnostic categories are catch-all phrases, really, that are not very efficient ways, not very efficient labels. They don't really give enough information. So individuality is the first key. In order to really understand what goes on, a detailed case history has got to be done. Because if someone has a lot of gut stuff, and that needs to be taken care of at the same time as their main symptoms. The other thing is that person A can have a tendency towards loose stools while person B is constipated or has very dry and thin stools. So even gut stuff, gastrointestinal symptoms, even that's not enough information. So one has to be quite detailed right off the bat so that one knows what goes on. So the first part of individuality is knowing what the overall symptom picture is and not stopping at the main one or two symptoms. And this turns out to be, as you'll see later, very, very important in terms of a person getting better. Because I haven't seen in my 10 years of practice that you can have one thing in the body get better without other things also getting better. If you aim at one thing only, one system only, everything else that's not being taken care of will drag it down, won't let it come up. So it's essential that a very clear idea of everything as it exists be present. So the first part of that, as I've just mentioned, is current signs and symptoms. Okay? The other thing that's very important is to try to understand what the causative factors are. You see, because you can have a few people with very similar current signs and symptoms, but they'll have different causative factors involved, and that requires different treatment. To give an example, some people may never be well since an emotionally intense and traumatic episode. Some people may have started to get worse after a car accident. Some people may have started to get worse after a botched up surgery, okay, or use of anesthetic repeatedly. These are the kind of things that I've seen. Other people have gradually gotten worse because they've been pushing for years and years and years, pushing beyond what the body has shown them to be its limits. So, feeling tired but not sleeping over and over and over again, or shift work. So, without knowing the causative factors, it's not possible to have a well-matched treatment. And without a proper match, you don't, it just doesn't work as well. Sometimes there's also a history of hepatitis. And I've also seen that in the medical history, so that sometime later, chronic fatigue syndrome or fibromyalgia becomes a diagnosis. So there's a lot of things in the medical history that needs to be understood. But not just medical history, also personal history, psychosocial history, what has been happening in life. Emotional reactions are, in my experience, perhaps the strongest modifiers of physiology. Okay? They're very fast, very deep, and very intense. If you're crossing the street and you feel the whiz of a car going by, instantly your heart will start pounding. Your legs might start shaking. That's how powerful and quick the effect of a strong emotion on the body can be. And to have that kind of intensity in the mind and the body will eventually wear it down. So if things have been on the mind and have not been resolved, if the marriage is not good, if the job is not, if it's really very stressful, all these things that are more internal, they have a very strong modifying effect on physiology, and therefore on whatever diagnosis a particular set of body symptoms might bring forward. So first key is individuality. It's not enough to know that the diagnosis is so-and-so, such and such. It doesn't matter what the diagnosis is. The only time that individuality is not completely important is when we're talking about something like the flu, something acute, something very short, comes and goes. There, you don't need to have all of this information. But for chronic patterns that have been ongoing and they're deeply rooted, one needs to understand these things. Back to medical history for another moment. Thyroid gland conditions I have also seen being implicated with the fibromyalgia chronic fatigue syndrome diagnosis. So some people will have that and will be taking some medication for it, and other people won't have that as part of the picture. These two people can't be treated the same way. Okay? It's just not going to work. So it's very important to get the complete picture. Other things about lifestyle are extremely important. For instance, diet. What type of diet is being taken is extremely important, and that varies from person to person. Sometimes a diet will be a problem, sometimes it'll be neutral, sometimes it'll be helpful. So that too needs to be looked at and understood. And there's not a golden rule about diet that says that a certain kind of diet is good for everybody. It depends. It depends on your ability to digest foods. Sometimes lots of foods make it on the best foods list, but they can't be digested because there's gas and so on. And so, what one should do at that point is leave them alone. Okay, the body has to be listened to. That's very key. Experience first, theory and model second. So if the body is giving you a signal that something is not working, then you must put it aside. So even if my experience is a lot of people think that they have a very good diet because it conforms to some theory about freshness of foods, raw foods, enzymes, and so on, but it just doesn't work here. For some people it works, and if it works, they should continue to follow it because it's obviously working. But if it's not working, then it should be given up for something that does work. So it's very difficult to have to go by theory and figure out what kind of diet one should be having. Okay, you got to listen to your body. It will let you know. Other things about lifestyle is what's the activity level like? Some people don't move their bodies very much. Other people do. And so, and these are all factors that will make things either better, worse, or will be neutral. So unless this is all taken into account, one can be taking drugs and herbs for years and things aren't moving very much because a number of other things are holding it down. So it's impossible to know in 2 minutes, just because a diagnosis has been heard, what's going on and what to do. Okay? If you start off that way, all I can say is good luck. I haven't seen that kind of thing work. To have a disease name and then to try to find a drug or herb against it, whereas that disease name covers that much of what's really going on, it doesn't work. I've not seen it work. My experience with persons diagnosed with fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue, people that I've been looking after and have looked after, is that almost all of them, when everything is looked at and understood and done according to what I'm talking about this evening, most people have dramatic improvements somewhere between 2 and 3 months. Some people even sooner than that. I've seen this over and over and over again. But it means dietary modifications. It means working with the body a certain way. It means taking certain herbal medicines according to very clear and precise reasoning, not just try this, then try that kind of approach. It's just, that doesn't work. So, an example of try this, try that approach. If I have fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome, maybe this week the worst thing for me is insomnia, so I might go looking for ways to deal with the insomnia and, go find something that helps me with that, but doesn't touch anything else. And the week after, it's the muscles that are really hurting, so then I want to take something that's anti-inflammatory. Okay, so I'm going after one thing at a time, and that is not efficient. So to have an overall recommendation, herbal, dietary, lifestyle, and so on, that matches everything that's going on, and to do it consistently, that gives results. I've seen that over and over and over again. So if someone says I have fibromyalgia, I really don't know what to do at that point. It doesn't mean anything to me. It just means that they have muscle pain. I don't know why that is, what else is going on. So it's not a good enough start. Individuality is extremely important, and not just in theory, but in my clinical experience, it's extremely important. You can't start off any other way and expect to get results.